Hello, and thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Billy Newman Photo Podcast. Appreciate you guys checking this one out. I wanted to talk about a trip that I did out to Eastern Oregon here just a little while back in the end of October, and it was kind of cool getting out to camp kind of late in October. It was nice, I guess, this year without having a lot of like wet weather days over in Eastern Oregon. So we've had like a lot of clear weather. I think it's been clear, and then also pretty cold here for like the last like week or two, but it had been above freezing for a while into October this year. I remember years past it would be like below freezing at least by like the 10th of October. I mean, even by like the 5th or so. I remember sometimes they're being in below freezing temperatures, especially over in Eastern Oregon, up in the mountains and stuff, or even in the plateau areas of the Great Basin. I remember some areas out there being like below freezing by quite a bit. But this year it was still pretty nice, pretty far into October. I was kind of impressed, but by the time I was out there for this trip, it was freezing, I'm pretty sure. So I was I think I went out over to Eastern Oregon, and I was out kind of in like that like the high desert lakes area. So there's like there's a few lakes that are all kind of like gathered together over there. I think it's like Silver Lake, Summer Lake, Abert Lake, Summer Lake I talked about. There's Goose Lake, that's further south. There's like Crump Lake. I think there's a few others, but like also some of them have kind of like dried out now too. But that whole area out there, as it kind of stretches over toward like Highway 395 further east from there, has a bunch of features and terrain that I don't really think I've explored too much of. Well, I've explored like a bit of it before, but there's a bunch of stuff out there that I thought would be kind of cool to check out. And I hardly got to any of it really. I think there's like really big areas that stretch out for a long amount of distance that are probably pretty hard to, or I don't know. I think they're all like pretty big stretches of public land. That's what's really cool about that area, is it's really big, like vast expanses of BLM land through a lot of that desert land, but it's also kind of difficult to traverse, is what I was going to say. That the roads there aren't really very well maintained, and there really aren't that many roads. So it's cool. You can get out, and if you have the time, you can hike those roads, or you can hike off anywhere you want, like off those roads, and just kind of like check out the area and the land around it. And it's definitely like a really interesting kind of landscape out there. But that's what I've always liked about the high desert lakes area out there, is the kind of like landscape and the trees and the rim rock and the way that looks out there. I always thought was pretty cool. So I took off over there, especially this time of year in October. It's really fun. I think a lot of the areas that I were in was really just like the juniper trees and sagebrush and stuff. But the way that the cloud textures are over in Eastern Oregon are always pretty cool this time of year in like kind of late and mid-October. But it's also really cool when you can come up upon some aspen trees. Like the aspen trees over there this time of year are really cool, because they kind of turn from that green-leafed tree with the white bark, and they have these really red or orange kind of fiery leaves, and they look really cool and kind of dramatic, and they have like a cool contrast in the landscape over there in Eastern Oregon. So it's cool. You can kind of come up on a grove of those. They seem to sort of grow in a cluster together over there in certain places when you get to certain elevations, when they're in good spots to grow. But up in the mountain passes there, or I think like some of those mountain rims in Eastern Oregon have some clusters of them, and it's really cool. You can kind of come up on them. I think up in the like the Fremont-Winema National Forest, as you were coming up to the rim over Summer Lake, I think I saw like a bunch of them over there. And I remember driving up through a number of those, and it was really cool. There's just big groves of them, and all the leaves kind of turn like really red, orange, bright colors as they're starting to drop. And this was really cool, especially in years like this where it hasn't really had a ton of rain or a ton of I guess even like early snow or just big storms that had come through and kind of knocked those leaves out prematurely. So a lot of them seem like they've been holding up pretty well, and it's got kind of a bright, kind of crisp look to it this October, given that there hasn't been much rain and it's been pretty clear, and It's just been, a little bit of wind, and now that it's frozen, I think the leaves are going to start dropping pretty quick. And now that the rain's probably going to come through, or a couple sets of storms are going to come through. So out there in Eastern Oregon, I came up on a spot to camp that I thought was pretty cool, and I was driving around through. What I did is I kind of took off from the main highway, and I took this mountain road that cuts off into BLM land, and it's real rocky, real bumpy. Almost doesn't look like a road at some times. So I threw it into like 4-wheel drive low for a lot of it to just kind of like crawl over a bunch of the rocks, or just kind of take it real slow and kind of take my time getting over stuff, and I took a couple miles back into this road, and then I would kind of stop along the way and then take up some hikes like out to the left or the right of the truck, and then kind of make like a little bit of a loop and then come back around to the truck and just sort of check out the area and see what was going on out there. And I had my camera with me, so I got to like walk around and take pictures and stuff. And then I've also on this trip been trying to take a bunch of video clips, like where I'd like take my tripod out with me on that little bit of a hike or something that I do, or a little walk around that I do, and then stop, set up the tripod, take a longer clip of video or a pan of video, so that I have that in my collection also, and then take a couple sets of photos. But it was cool, and I like this area and this time of year too. It's tough in the summertime out there in Eastern Oregon, and also I think sometimes in the wintertime too when it's sunny. But when it gets like real sunny and it's real clear out, you get this kind of like haziness to the sky a little bit, and everything just sort of looks a little bit more blown out with the sun and the way that the shadows look on the ground, especially through like the midday. So real early in the morning, it can look really cool as the light's kind of coming up over the horizon, and real late in the afternoon as it's kind of getting near the horizon again. Over in the west, that can look pretty cool, but when it's real clear, it looks really kind of blown out and washed out and harsh during the day, and it definitely looks like that a lot during the summer as the sun's real high up above. But now, as it gets kind of in the fall here, what's cool is you have like a bunch of these kind of textured clouds moving across the sky as part of the weather pattern, and so you get sort of a more textured landscape, and you also get a lot of shade cast with the highlights of sun sort of still coming through it on days that aren't totally overcast. So that was what was fortunate for me. That's sort of part of what you get is the weather on some of the circumstances of weather that you get during this period of time from like kind of mid-October into November before it gets kind of real wintry and stormy out there as you get into later November. But this time of year is really cool. So I really like that part of it a lot, where you can kind of go out and you see like a lot of texture in the sky as it kind of goes up in elevation up into the sky, but you still see, some sunny sky. You see kind of color to that light that's sort of cast through the clouds. And you also see color in the clouds and texture in the clouds. And I don't know, it just seems like you get like a little bit more to photograph. And I always like that when the sky's got some texture in it. So that's kind of cool with some of the landscape work that I was trying to do out there in Eastern Oregon. And I thought it was pretty fun going out there. But it was cool, the spot that I came up to camp at, which was sort of like by the end of the day, was this pretty small, I guess it would have been a pond, or it would have been like a real small lake, probably like a 5-acre lake bed. But now it's dried out. There's no water up there at all. But for maybe what kind of gathers there incidentally through the year as it sort of collects across the landscape like it would have naturally, but it's really nowhere near as much as it would have been before. But it's cool. It's up along this piece of rim rock that sort of stretches along and then kind of connects into the hillside. But below that there's like this big lake area, and you can kind of see how flat the landscape is there as it sort of had been settled with the lake bed over time, and then as it kind of lifts up under the banks of that as the rocks sort of reappear and then kind of turn up into rim rock. But it was cool. I got to drive my truck just kind of like right out onto the lake bed, which is really just like a grown-up meadow now. And then there's two truck tracks that kind of cut and crisscross through the lake bed there back and forth. But yeah, I pulled off, and it's just sort of like listed as a road. I pulled off into this little lake and crossed over it to the other side toward the rim rock, and then got to hang out and then set up a camp over there. And it looked like people had already been there. There was like a fire ring set up, and it was kind of a cleared out area with sort of like a sandy bottomed, sort of like grit dirt base beneath me, and then these reeds of grass that were sort of growing up out into the distance a couple feet. But that was really cool. I really kind of appreciated getting to go out there. Also, what I thought was pretty cool at this spot that I was camping out was trying to set up the tripod to take long exposure photos at night there. So when it got dark, the sky was really cool, and there was also still a little bit of those clouds that were sort of drifting in and out at different times, which kind of added like some cool texture to it. They were kind of lower cumulus clouds that were moving pretty quickly across the landscape. So if you had a longer exposure of 20 seconds or somewhere around 30 seconds or so, you could let in a lot of light, which would be cool for the photos of the stars, but you could also get a little bit of a drag effect to the view of the clouds, those cumulus clouds, as they move sort of quickly at low elevations across the skyline there. And so you could kind of, over 30 seconds, kind of get this sweep look as these clouds kind of swept across, sort of, I think they were moving kind of I guess it would be sort of like a west to, I guess, generally east motion. I think it was sort of like a northwest to like southeast direction, more or less. But it was cool, yeah, kind of watching these clouds sort of zip by. And then I was looking up at like, I think it was Jupiter and Saturn that were sort of up against this rim rock area that I was looking at, and I think it was part of the constellation of Sagittarius, and then Scorpio was sort of down by that time, but it was cool looking at that. And then a little bit further over to the east was where a really bright view of Mars was. It has that kind of bright orange, sort of coppery color to it, and it looks really beautiful right now. It's cool this time of year. I think it's near opposition to us, so it kind of rises up around the same time as the sun is setting. It's a little bit off from that, but it looks really large in the sky right now, and it's a really beautiful and like bright view of Mars as it's sort of coming up over into the eastern sky as it starts to get dark in the evening. But it was cool looking at Mars, and then looking at Saturn and Jupiter over in the Sagittarius area. So that was kind of cool, and then trying to take photographs of that along with some of what you can kind of see within the Milky Way was pretty cool too. So I was trying to set that up and get some long exposure night photography of that. And I really like the way that the sweeped look of the clouds look as it kind of crosses the sky. And that's something I was kind of trying to do a bit with some of the photography I was doing out there, was trying to get a long exposure sweeped look to the photos of the clouds in the sky. And it's cool. I got one of these tools that helps me do that in the daytime too. And so when I was saying, like, I was out there in the daytime, I could take my tripod and then set up this big stopper, which is really just like it looks like black smoke glass, but it's got like a 10 stop ND filter on it that fits into a pocket that goes over your lens. And so you can set your lens to something that would be 10 stops of a slower exposure to gather more light. And then that kind of gives you an effect, so you can kind of change the amount of time that you have your exposure set for if you want to kind of make some different effects, which is really cool if you want to try and shoot like moving water during daytime light. You can kind of change that effect a lot. I've done a lot of cool stuff at rivers with it, but this was really cool too, of just going to a landscape where like you're trying to take a picture of a landscape, but there's clouds in the sky, and those clouds will move over a period of 30 seconds. And so you can set it up with this big stopper, take a photograph of that landscape. You can expose correctly for the landscape, but with the big stopper, you get the effect of the time passage. And then that means that you can kind of see the sweep of the clouds in the sky as time passed and the clouds kind of moved west to east. So it's pretty cool getting to try that out. And I think some of the results from it are pretty cool. And some of the long exposure results near dusk or near the blue hour were pretty cool too. So I was happy to kind of get to try that out and get to work on that a bit. And then I was also talking about like video clips too. How I was trying to get some video clips of different pieces, and that's been working out, I think, pretty well. I've been trying different spots, like different spots of the coast, different spots on this mountain drive I was on, and then here different spots over in eastern Oregon, out in the high desert, and I'm kind of trying to get like an addition of just kind of okay or cool or sort of steady like full HD video clips at different locations. There's a lot of stuff where I've like had my phone and I've just kind of like held it and recorded a lot, and even still I'm trying to do that with the camera to get sort of some casual video recording clips at more times through little trips and travel pieces that I'm doing, just so it seems like I have video content as well as photo content that I captured on some of these outings that I do. But as I'm going around, trying to capture some cool video pieces, trying to use the tripod for it, and try and get some steady shots that are like a little bit more cleaned up than just some of the walk around stuff that I've done with my phone or with other means in the past. So that's been kind of cool, but still a lot of the primary stuff is photo for sure. I've had the film camera out a bit. I was setting that up on the tripod, trying to get a couple photographs with it as I kind of go around to different spots, and I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, I was dealing with that rocky road out there, so I camped out by that lake bed near the rim rock, looking at the stars and stuff. That was really cool. I've got that portable propane heater with me, and that's really been saving me from the real cold weather. And I think kind of like I was talking about on that last podcast, how I think a couple podcasts back, how some of the layering I'm trying to do is like a wool layer as a base layer, and then a down insulation layer, and then a Gore-Tex rain shell over that. And so I was fortunate I didn't have to deal with any like wet weather rain stuff, but that Gore-Tex shell over the down and wool really holds in like a lot of the heat too. So that was helping me a ton out there while it was getting pretty cold. I think like this time of year in October, it was like it was before the time change just now, but at that time it was like 6 o'clock that it was getting dark. Now it's 5 o'clock that it's just dark out, and it's cold out too. It's like clear and late October, and then it just gets real cold in those kind of higher elevation kind of mountain lake areas out there in eastern Oregon. So it seemed like it was getting kind of near freezing here. There pretty soon. It seemed like it was in the 30s at least, like pretty soon after dark. So I was definitely trying to add up some layers and turn that propane heater on and try and stay pretty warm. So I wasn't in the tent. I was just in the canopy in my truck, and that was able to stay pretty insulated through the night. So it wasn't really like a big deal, and it was okay. I think I've talked about this before too. My sleeping bag, I think, is rated at like a 15-degree sleeping bag, and so this time I doubled it up with like a second sleeping bag that was like a 15-degree sleeping bag, and that worked pretty well, but. I really even still I was like, man, I need like a blanket, but I think I need to go like for like a thicker 0-degree bag or something like that. Maybe I can use that, and or maybe even double that up with this one too. But yeah, like dealing with the cold out there as it drops down to freezing is, I think, kind of difficult. I don't really ever seem to enjoy it. Like people kind of seem to get through some of those cold nights and some of those like higher elevation or harsher environments. I mean, Oregon is really like a pretty temperate climate in a lot of ways. I can't imagine like being out in Arizona where it's 7 degrees or something like that in some of those mountain spots that I've heard of, or certainly like out in anywhere like those northern areas or like the boreal forest as it gets into the winter time and you have to deal with like a lot of snow. This is just kind of like a nice sort of dry climate where it's maybe dipping into the freezing temperatures. But even still, I've just never really enjoyed like just kind of hanging out in the dark with really not a ton of stuff to do. Kind of, I don't know, I guess kind of maybe taking pictures and sort of standing by a little space heater. But yeah, it was pretty fun though. It was cool, kind of hanging out and sort of putting up with the cold and stuff, and hanging out by a camp and taking some pictures of the sky at night and stuff. That was pretty cool. But yeah, the next day I got up and I think I tried to put together a little bit of food and stuff that I had, which is kind of fun when you're out doing the camp and stuff. But I got in the truck, got in the 4-wheel drive going again, and then kind of carried on that bumpy mountain road for a while and took a couple forks of the road off to another sort of small 4 or 5 acre pond bed or lake bed that used to be out there and then now is gone, and it sort of rests against what it kind of eroded against some rim rock against the side, and then just sort of some rolling hills that sort of carry on past it. But it's these kind of like little dips that kind of come up maybe 100 feet or so, then down 80, and then sort of come up and down a little bit as it sort of rolls along on the landscape out there. And from Google Earth, it looks like it's just a real arid, sort of flat, no vegetation kind of landscape. But when you get out there, you notice that a lot of it is these sort of, it's kind of a sparsely populated area of juniper trees. But when you sort of look across, it really fills the space up pretty well. Whereas you look across, you see just like a good amount of trees and vegetation, and it's all these, these kind of smaller but kind of wide in the shape that they are. These like juniper trees are just sort of smaller, like evergreen trees out there, kind of intermixed with the sagebrush and stuff, and it kind of looks cool with the type of landscape as it is as you look back. I think as I was looking toward the south, as the mountains kind of pick up a little bit more, it kind of just has like a cool look to it as you see like the sagebrush, the juniper trees, and then it kind of sweeps up as you kind of pick up toward the rim rock as you get near to, I think, Summer Lake, and you get up as a view toward the uplift as it moves into the Fremont-Wenema National Forest. But it was cool, yeah, being out there, driving around, four-wheeling around out there was pretty cool. And I think I went about as far as I could on that road before it really just sort of like washed out and just kind of turned into nothing after a while. So I bet somebody could take it a little bit further than I did, but I think it runs into some private property at the end of it. So I decided to kind of wrap up there and then spin around. And then I cruised back to the little town that was out there and stopped in and got coffee, which is always like kind of a necessity. I think I had like my mix with me. I have like my jet boil and coffee mix with me, but I stopped in and stopped at a little coffee shop place, which I always kind of try and do at some of these little towns. Like I did it over at the coast a couple weeks ago too. Not the coast, but I don't know, it was some like little logging town next to it, But out here, yeah, in Eastern Oregon, picked up some coffee, and I took off to another set of these like small little rolling hills that were out there. So off the bigger rim rock section, I went over, I think from, I guess it would be like the south side, and then I crossed town and then went north of town to like the other side of like the top of this lake area that it would be. And then there's this set of like little rolling hills that kind of carry on for maybe 10 acres or so. And I guess that was like a pretty anthropologically active area back in the past, which is really cool that these different tribes had moved into the area and then use the land to camp at or to set up and then go out and do like hunting trips from around the area. And it's really cool to kind of think about the land that you're kind of walking around as different places that people had camped sort of nomadically through different seasons over thousands of years out there. I think it's like there's like 12,000-year-old artifacts dating back to that area around like Fort Rock, and I think over by some other Paisley ice caves. I think some other area like that. And then there's other information about, more recent stuff too from history just, a couple hundred years ago. So really cool to kind of be out in that area and get to check it out and walk around and stuff. But yeah, this area has a bunch of small roads through it that kind of roll over the hills and stuff. And I was able to have like a pretty good map of what was there. And I've been out to that area a couple times before, but I didn't really know where the roads went. So I didn't really get to explore around as effectively as it was this time. But it was pretty cool getting to cut through a couple of different pieces and get to stop, get out, get to take like kind of short walks out and get to go up to different lookout points and take pictures and stuff of the landscape and stuff out there of these little kind of rolling rock formations that sort of carry along these hills for a few acres. So that was pretty fun getting to go out there, and I kind of made like a big loop with the truck and four-wheel drive, and sort of came up this like draw along like a creek, and then came up the hill, and sort of was like a four-wheel, like a real four-wheeling experience where you're just kind of like pulling up this big kind of rocky thing up to the top of a mountain, and then you kind of take off down the backside of it, and then kind of intersect back down with the main road. But yeah, I did that for a good part of the day, and kind of took some photos and videos of some of the stuff out there, and then took off, and I took like a gravel road that sort of cut between that small town that I was at to another town further north of there. And there's like a highway infrastructure that sort of connects the two, but that sort of, I guess, would make like a V shape between it. And this gravel road sort of cuts the long stretch along the top of the V. And so I was able to take that and take that road back up to this small town before I was able to head out. But it was cool going over through that area. And I think that was as it was starting to become evening and stuff. And there's a bunch of little spots where I could pull out along the side of it, set up my tripod, and take some pictures and stuff. And that evening was cool with the clouds and stuff. Same as I was doing the night before in that area by the Rimrock, was I was able to kind of get out the truck this time. And I had like a little bit more open view where it was just sort of like a bigger, wider, open landscape with the cloud formations and then the sky and stuff above that. And I was able to stop for a few of those. And take some cool long exposure photos of the night sky and the sweeping clouds and stuff of the area up there. But it was cool. Yeah, I loved getting out there and going around through some stuff on the high desert area, especially out there in October. I think it's like my favorite time of year to be out in the high desert and to get to go camping up in the area up there. So it was cool having the truck outfitted for it a little bit better, and it was cool going and getting some photos and stuff. But thanks a lot for listening to this episode of the Billy Newman Photo Podcast. I appreciate you guys tuning in and checking it out again this week. And if you can, go to billynewmanphoto.com to check out more information about me and about some of the photo stuff that I'm doing. And until then, I'll talk to you again next time.